Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Checkpoint Coffee, your local gaming show. I'm your host, Moons, and with me are Tahsin from the Emmen Team and a special guest, the local Twitch streamer and game development final year student, Nemui Ghost.
Hello.
Guys, this is the Unity episode. It's the one where we talk about all the recent updates and the publicity disaster that has been surrounding the Unity game engine lately. For those who are not in the know, Unity is arguably one of the two most popular game engines out there. Games that use Unity include Genshin Impact, Cuphead, Pokemon Go, Among Us, Subnautica, and Hollow Knight. Anyway, Unity has recently announced a new pricing scheme that has pretty much lit the internet on fire. It released a statement essentially saying that it wanted to charge developers each time someone installs their game. Now, this change will apply after the game meets a certain revenue and installation threshold. But still, simply put, if a game earns a certain amount of money and has a certain amount of installs, the developers have to pay Unity a fee. And this new standard was set to go into effect January the 1st, 2024. Everyone hated that. And since then, Unity has clarified that it would only be charging their fee if the sales and install threshold is reached within a certain time frame. Even so, with the added clarification, the issue is still hard enough to boil an egg on. So let's get into it. I'm going to throw a question to you guys. What were your first reactions upon hearing this news?
Okay, I myself am like someone who's just observing this as as an enthusiast, as an industry observer. So when this first came out, it was like, how could Unity do this, right? I think it's been some time that a lot of game developers have been slowly losing trust in Unity, and I think for a lot of people, this was like the final straw, right? So a lot of people are like putting out statements against how putting their games on like Unity, like using Unity as their game development engine. So yeah, the initial reaction is quite bad.
Nemui, what about you?
Yeah, like when I first saw the article, my first article talking about Unity charging some runtime fees for developers and stuff, I thought damn, this is really bad. And then I thought that they would clarify some more, because I was kind of hoping that it wasn't as bad as it sounded, right? Like $0.2 per install. And install seemed kind of weird to me. At first, I thought maybe they meant to put per purchase, right? But then they elaborated on it and told us all the details, right? And that Moons, like you said, that it is once the game reaches a certain threshold of installs and made a certain amount of revenue within the past 12 months, that they would begin charging you this fee per install. So it doesn't matter if the person that's, bought your game, purchased your game once, if they downloaded it across multiple devices, then you would just get charged for each of those devices that you installed. And I just felt like that was a very scummy move. If it was a fee per purchase, that would be more understandable, because it's kind of like paying royalties to Unity or something, right? But this just seemed really weird to me, and I'm hoping for some more updates on Unity's side on how things go.
All right, well, a lot of the answers that you've given deal with the financial angle, the money stuff. So let's talk about that a little. So Unity plans to charge essentially 0.2 USD for every install of a game that meets the criteria that they have set. Just how much money are we talking anyway?
Can you elaborate on that?
What I mean by that is, in terms of the amount of games earned by big companies versus small companies, how much money are we looking at that Unity will make out of this if this goes through?
So far, it's kind of like how this will mostly affect pretty big games. So it'll affect larger companies that use Unity. For example, MiHoYo/HoYoverse, all of their games that I know of so far have been made on the Unity engine, and they make somewhere upwards of billions of dollars. And so they're going to be losing quite a sizable portion of that money, possibly maybe in the millions range too. And since these games that they have are usually games which are cross-platform, so your one account, you can play the game on your PC, your desktop PC, then also on your laptop and also on your mobile phone as well, right? So there's already 3 devices being used by one person. So those larger companies, I believe, will lose quite a sizable amount of money. As for the indie companies, they will be losing less unless there's some big indie game like Hollow Knight, for example, Hollow Knight was a game made by a very small team of people, and it is one of the most popular indie games to date right now, and they make quite a lot of money, but then they're going to be losing quite a lot of their money for their hard work, which I don't personally think is fair. It's going to be very rare to see an indie game cross that threshold that Unity has set up. But in my opinion, that the hard work that the indie game developers put in, they should not go punished, right? So if I make an indie game, I don't want to have that feeling of, say, I want my indie game to do well. I want it to grow big. I want a lot of people to have fun playing it. But if I'm stuck with this worry of, hey, if my game reaches a certain amount of installs, or if I make a certain amount of revenue, then I'm going to have to start bleeding this money for Unity. So that's where I stand on that.
Yes, I think very much true when he was talking about the big companies and the small game developers, and it's more about like how much Unity is gaining. It's more about like, I mean, Unity certainly will gain a lot of money, but it's also about how much you are going to lose, right? So you'll have to be thinking about, let's say if you're making a free-to-play educational game, right, with all free-to-play content, then even that game, when it reaches this threshold, but I suppose at certain point these in-game purchases will have to be there. So Nemui, I think it was like 200,000 installs, or was it 200,000 in profit that they were mentioning in their requirement?
It was both. So the game needs to reach 200,000 installs and make $200,000 worth of revenue within 12 months to meet the criteria.
Yeah, and if you're like, let's say like game development is a serious business, right? So even if you're planning to like put your game on the market, then you would obviously want it to do well, right? And like you said, like when you meet this certain like threshold, let's say when your downloads reach 190,000, you'll start being really worried about this game, right? So past that point, you would be bleeding a lot. So it's not an ideal situation to be in. And I think from Unity's side, they have these people who work very closely with the company, the insiders who also raised this concern. I think these insiders were also informed like 24 hours before they made this very big change public, right? Usually I think that's not the case. The insiders would have more time to weigh in on this and give their feedback to the business executives, but I don't think they've had that much operating time with this announcement as well.
I'm glad you guys are talking about Unity now. We talked about the losing money aspect. Now let's talk about the gaining money aspect, right? Simply put, does Unity need this extra money? Is it strapped for cash? Is it really like suffering in silence and we never knew about it? Nemui, what are your thoughts? Is Unity, poor little Unity, in need of our financial assistance? Or let's say from the game developer's side?
In my opinion, I don't think so, because it is currently like, there are a lot of game development engines out there, but a lot of them are also privately owned by a lot of these companies. For example, Ubisoft with the Anvil engine, only Ubisoft has access to that. But there are quite a few game development engines that are available to the public. But out of the two of those, I would say the one that almost everyone goes for, the one that's mostly used, is Unreal Engine, owned by Epic Games, and Unity Engine, right? And for Unity to be competing with Unreal Engine is already like testament to how well like it's doing. Like the second thing is there are plenty of ways that they do make money, in the sense that Unity, while being a free engine, also has a pro version of it, which is really useful, but by no means cheap. Now, it's true that a lot of indie developers have no need for it. I would say even in indie development teams, once you go past like the 5-6 developer, the team member threshold, I would say having the pro version would be really helpful. So I do imagine a lot of small indie companies would have it, but maybe not indie developers. You get like one person versus 6-10 people would have it. And as for larger companies, corporations, I imagine that they will need the pro version. And I don't remember how expensive it was before, but currently, if I'm not mistaken, the one license for Unity Pro to be used by a whole team is $2,000 a year subscription. And on top of that, Unity also has several assets in their asset stores that they can sell. So how this basically works is, if you're any kind of creator, and maybe not even a game developer, maybe you're a 3D artist, right, that has no experience in coding or whatnot, and you just made a really cool 3D character, rigged it, and you thought, maybe you initially did this for a little movie that you were going to make, but then you thought, hey, this could be really good and useful for games, right? So you go to Unity Asset Store, you put your asset there, and say you put a price on it, right? So other people, if they want to use this 3D model of a character that you made in their own game, they can pay you a certain amount of money for it. They can list themselves, and they can download that and use that in their own games. But because this is on the Unity Asset Store, Unity gets a cut from the amount of money you make. So if you sell like an asset for $15, Unity will get a certain cut of it. And I'm not sure about what the exact cut is, but I have been digging around some of the Unity forums there, and I think like some the members of Unity there mentioned that the cut should be somewhere around 30% or something.
30%? That's a
Yeah.
lot of percent. I thought it would be like 5%. My goodness.
Yeah, I went into it assuming that too. So when I found out, I was like, 30% is actually quite a lot. Like, so if you're selling like an asset for like $10, Unity makes like $3 out of it, right? So taking all of this into account with the Unity Pro version and the Unity Asset Store, not to mention all the free advertising that they get from all these YouTube channels with their Unity tutorials. Now, I myself, like, I'm on the final year of my degree, and I can say all these YouTube channels have definitely carried me on their back when it came to my degree, right? And they're basically doing like, yeah, some of them are sponsored by Unity, but quite a lot of them are basically doing free advertising for Unity. So they're saving money and also making money too. So I don't think Unity is necessarily strapped for cash, like, is my opinion anyway.
Yeah.
Well, looking at all these signs, it doesn't seem like the company is doing poorly at all. Tahsin, any thoughts?
Yeah, so unlike people who run Unreal Epic Games, they are a private company, right? So Unity actually, they became a public traded company back in 2020. So I think since then, there's been like some very suspicious decisions that they've taken in order to increase more profit, increase more revenue, because if you're a publicly traded company, then it's always going to be about generating more revenue and generating more money. And unfortunately for Unity, it seems like even if they are going to run the engine to the ground, make more money, while it just seems to be the case as of yet. So like Nemui said, we really hope Unity does something about this soon, because right now it's not looking good at all.
Doing something about it soon. That makes me kind of think about the future a little bit. So I'm gonna kind of shift gears a little bit. So we've talked about the financial angle. Let's talk about the game development angle, starting with development itself. How do you guys think that this decision by Unity will impact game development? Not the developers, but development itself. Let's start there first.
When it comes to game development now, like I said, a lot of the game developing companies are using Unity and have been using Unity for several years now, and a lot of them, I guess, would be thinking about migrating to another engine, which is gonna cost them quite a bit because it's a lot of work to say if there's already a game being made on Unity, to transfer all of that onto another engine is a lot of work. And you're gonna have to maybe even start building some games from scratch as well. And as for games that already exist, that's even more hard work because you're just gonna have to do everything that you've done and just shift that over to another engine. And you're also going to need to retrain your core developers, right? So different engines use different programming languages. For example, Unity uses a language called C#, and Unreal Engine uses a language called C++. So if you want to move over, you're going to have to either hire new developers that are more proficient in C++, or you're going to have to retrain your current employees to do that as well. Even right now, I imagine a lot of companies are doing that. And I don't know exactly what it is, but MiHoYo recently put out something about where they're hiring a lot of engine developers. And they haven't exactly said why, but I can only theorize that they're either planning to migrate to another engine, like maybe Unreal Engine, or maybe they're gonna try to build their own engine. But like I said, MiHoYo is one of those companies that's gonna lose a lot of money if this runtime fee goes through with it. And as though those are what it is from the company's side of things, where they're gonna have to go through some large initial cost to move everything away from Unity so that they can avoid bleeding money forever.
What do you think about this, Tahsin?
Yeah, I think as Nemui said, it's a it's going to be a lot of burden for these like game development companies, and there's going to be probably sort of shift, because even though the initial cost would be higher, maybe a lot of these companies will migrate to another engine like Unreal, or start maybe even having their own custom game development engines, right? And when it comes to their own engines, it will be again quite a difficult transition for the people who are going to be like out there looking for jobs, because if you're talking about Unreal and if you're talking about Unity, as of now you have this access. You can like watch YouTube videos and you can train yourself, you can like acquire these skills, right? But let's say if these are like custom engines, then there will be some amount of extra work that is required for the company to train the new hires in order to get fully acquainted with the new system, right? So yes, it's going to be quite a difficult transition period for the developers, and as well quite difficult and expensive for the companies as well.
So we've talked a bit about game developers while we're talking about the development side of things, kind of broached the topic. So I think we should head into it full on. How do you think this will impact the game developers themselves? The most key component, in my opinion, when it comes to game development.
Yes. That is, let's say, well, when it comes to how it's going to affect game developers, I'm going to say it's going to make things really hard for quite a lot of them, because it's like you spend a lot of time learning a certain engine and then all the nitty-gritty details about it, all the cool things that you can, unique things that you can do with that development engine once you reach a certain level of mastery over it, right? So there are people that are out there that's really, really good at Unity. Sometimes have even dedicated whole like YouTube channels to make Unity tutorials to make it easier for other people, and they have spent years honing their skills on this engine. And if they don't want this whole runtime fee burden over their head, then they're going to need to retrain themselves and move to another engine. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be too much of a difficult thing. For example, like learning a game engine for the first time is going to be really hard. But if you've already reached a certain level of mastery in something like Unity, then it shouldn't take as much effort to transfer those skills onto Unreal Engine. But it'll still take you quite a bit of time, maybe like a couple of months, to be as comfortable as you used to be, or confident enough for you to actually take on a professional job or make proper like marketable games out of it. So that's one thing that's there too. And when it comes to looking for a job as well, a lot of these companies, they do use Unity. It's either like their own game engine, Unity, or Unreal. I personally, like when I looked for a job for my internship, right? Almost every game development company that I've applied to has either asked me to be good in Unity or Unreal. I have never seen them ask for proficiency in any other game engine. At least that's how it is in Malaysia. So I didn't see Godot, I didn't see FNA. All I saw were Unity or Unreal, right? So now these companies that have used this Unity before, if they transfer over to another game engine, all I'm going to see is Unreal or their own, private custom game engine, right? Now, if it reaches the point where it's their own, custom engine, it means every job that you apply to, you will be required to retrain yourself to use their own engine. So let's say you work for Ubisoft for 5 years, and then you move to, say, Larian Studios after 5 years, right? Almost everything that you learned about Ubisoft's Anvil engine will not apply Larian's own engine, right? Only the common C# knowledge and programming knowledge and everything you have will transfer over. Everything else, you'll need to spend about a couple of maybe 3-4 months relearning before you can actually properly start your work. And it'll be a similar thing when it comes to other public open source game engines as well. So there's quite a lot. There's Godot, there's FNA, for example, right? If the position that was taken by Unity is now taken over by 5 other game engines as well, that's more game engines that you as a developer need to know and to have mastery over if you want to have flexibility when it comes to looking for a job as well. And yeah, finally, it all sucks for me because me as a game development student I have used Unreal Engine as well, but I have mostly been using Unity in my 3 years of studying here, and sort of knowing that I just get this feeling that right after I graduate, no company out there will be looking for a Unity developer is kind of upsetting as well. So I'm going to need to retrain myself as well.
Yeah, so like Nemui mentioned, I think for especially developers, this is going to be a very difficult process in order to like retrain yourself and get more acquainted with other game engines. And some of these game engines may be Unreal, but like the lesser known engines may not be as good as like, the big two, which is, I suppose, why a lot of these companies would ideally adopt for like Unreal or their own engine, right? And yeah, this is not an ideal situation to be in if you like have already spent years trying to learn Unity and have got to a point where you are comfortable making games with Unity. And either way, like if this goes through and when companies start switching to Unreal or their own development engines, it's going to be more time for you to like learn these engines again and get more familiar with these engines. So it's not a good situation to be in for like game developers at all.
It sets an industry standard where there will have to be a mandatory training period for every new development hire, isn't it?
Yes.
Now, let's kind of pivot a little bit further from this discussion to another angle of this. What do you think about the responses from current group of game developers across the industry? It has been a very heated topic. We've been seeing a lot of statements and a lot of graphics and whatnot. So, any thoughts?
So far, I'm actually, how do I say, we're kind of happy about the responses, because at first I thought it was really bad. For me, this sort of, I didn't want to go through it, and I was kind of worried that I might be just, some of the few people that aren't okay with paying the runtime fee, because I was worried a lot of people would see, it's just, 2 cents, like 0. It's not 2 cents, like $0.2 that you have to pay for each install, and it might brush it off as not big of a deal. But to see that almost every game developer, not just indie game development, so many people are unhappy with this, and the response was overwhelmingly negative. And I believe over like 400 different game development companies have already started boycotting Unity as a result of this. And it's gotten to the point where Unity has even put out a statement saying that they've heard us and that they're going to rework their policies and stuff too. And now, while I don't think that will completely repair the damage done, because so many people have lost trust in Unity and will probably migrate anyway, even if they do fix it, because the trust is gone now. The fact that we got through to them and are even getting them to consider changing their policies is a win, in my opinion. It's kind of like, pun completely intended, to see all these game developers united against Unity, the Unity against Unity. It's what I'm going to say. So that's that is something that worries me a lot, because when one company takes it a step too far, other companies start normalizing it in a lot of cases. So I feel like everyone uniting and sending the message out there that this is not okay, and then not letting Unity go through with this at all, would prevent other companies from following through. Because one of the worst things that could happen is for Unity to go ahead and start charging their developers runtime fees, and then for like a couple of months later, Epic Games comes out and starts doing the same for Unreal Engine.
Okay, that is the bad ending. Well, let's not even try to imagine that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like thankfully it's been almost like everyone is thinking the same when it comes to this. Like most of the game development studios have been very vocal about their frustration of Unity, and I think some of the, even jokingly, I think a cult of the lame have like said we are going to pull out our game from Steam, but turns out they're joking, but they are like still quite serious about, they've put out a statement, I think, about the frustration with Unity. And even some developers, like the developers of Terraria, yeah, Relogic, yeah. The developers of Relogic have even announced that they'll be providing a donation of $100,000 for 2 game development engines, I think, FN and Godot.
Yes.
I think those 2 engines will receive a donation from this developer itself, so which is a very positive thing. And hopefully, Unity hasn't said that they are sorry. They just sounded more like, you guys are forcing us to tweet this response. So hopefully they will take it a bit more seriously, considering that a lot of these people who have been very vocal about their trusting of Unity for a long time, even they are voicing out their frustrations about this runtime fee. So hopefully before this runtime fee takes into effect January 1st of 2024, I think, hopefully Unity will see reason, we hope.
Yes. And that, I think, pretty neatly covers majority of the aspects around this issue. So I want to open the floor up for any final thoughts, any overall feelings or thoughts on the matter. What do you guys think? Sum it all up. Where are you at?
For me, like I recently heard that Unity's founder and former CEO has also put out a statement and is getting involved in this whole situation, and he did admit that the company did mess up and are trying to fix things. But for me personally, again, it's kind of not safe, because even if they do go back on this and don't go through with the runtime fees and they're able to use it normally, right? It's the trust is gone, right? So what if after I graduate, I do plan to one day make my maybe an indie game of my own, right? And if I use Unity to make that and it does really well, right? It might not happen this year, but say 5 years from now, they suddenly start charging me for the game that I made after I graduated, right? I wouldn't want that, right? So I'm still kind of iffy on this. I do want to keep using Unity because it is what I'm best at, but I most likely think that I'll be looking into other engines that I can use, either Godot, that's been getting really popular right now, or Unreal Engine, which is the second option, one of the big two. So I'll probably be learning that, and once I graduate, right now I have to keep using Unity because that's what my university requires right now. But yeah, I will be learning mostly Unreal Engine once I graduate. And I would say the only thing that would give me enough trust in Unity for me to keep using their engine once I graduate would be if the current CEO, John Riccitiello, steps down.
A lot of the times we find that the questionable decisions made by big companies in the gaming industry, there's usually a bit of executive influence there. Tahsin, how would you sum up your thoughts on the issue before we close the book on it?
So talking about the current CEO of Unity, I think he's gained a bit of reputation for himself. This was the same guy back when he was in EA. I think he said something similar, when they were making a shooter game, let's say if the players pay $1 every time they reload their guns, right? So I don't have much faith in this guy from what I've heard, but the concerning thing for me is that when Unity is going to calculate the number of installs and whatnot, they are going to be using their own data models, which is going to be in-house, and probably the developers and these companies will not have an idea of the transparency, did my game really get this amount of installs? For you to charge me this amount is going to be a bit of a tricky situation as well. And I think there's same concern when it comes to the pirated games as well, right? So these are all very gray areas that I think currently a lot of people, even Unity, they haven't really given out a proper response to these questions. Even in their FAQ section, I think a lot of people are asking about this. So yeah, it's quite a difficult situation for the game development community and the gaming industry in general, because this will really put a halt in a lot of the games that are in development, I think.
Yeah, I feel the same. That's something that I actually forgot to talk about, the whole install thing, right? So it's already the thing is that they chose one of the worst times to do this, because right now a lot of devices such as the Steam Deck are getting really popular, right? So what you could do is you could say buy a game, Hollow Knight for example, on your Steam account, so you can download it to your laptop for example. So that's one device already downloaded that's gonna incur a runtime fee on Team Cherry. And let's say you have a Steam Deck, and if Hollow Knight is compatible with the Steam Deck, you can download it again on your Steam Deck, and that's once again another runtime fee that's incurred on Team Cherry, right? Similarly, Steam, for those that don't know, has a Steam family sharing system, which allows 5 users to share one account. So basically across 5 different devices, right? So if I currently do this with my younger brother right now, so if I buy a game on Steam, he'll be able to download it, even though he has a different Steam account, he'll be able to use games in my library on his account because I added him as a family member, right? So he'll be able to download that game on his PC. And if you're both playing the same game, that's basically, we're buying the game once, so the developer gains that money, but then the fee is being applied to him twice. And do note that this family sharing can work up to 5 people. So that's 5. So if you're paying like $0.2 per person, that's the whole dollar gone from the developer already, just from one purchase. Not to mention, this also opens up the avenue for the level of internet trolling, where if a group of people don't like one developer, they could possibly create several virtual machines and then run a script to download the game over and over again on each of these virtual machines, just so that it would rack up the runtime fees on the developer that they don't like, and it would incur quite a lot of charges on them. And right now, there's no way of knowing whether these are fraudulent activities except just taking Unity's word for it. So, like I said, it's a huge gray area. It's a very risky thing to do, in my opinion, too.
I absolutely agree with a lot of what you guys said. I feel very much the same way as well. And with that, I think we've reached the end of our discussion here today. That is all the time we have for you. And it has been a really fun discussion, I must say. Nemui Ghost, thank you very much for joining us and for your deep insight into the topic. We at Emmen Gaming hope that you at home got something interesting out of our discussion today. So, you guys, thanks for joining me on today's topic. I really found your opinions to be interesting and insightful.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Moni. Nemui, it's been a very fruitful discussion, although a bit depressing, but
Yeah.
state of game right now.
Well, I guess this would be kind of helpful in letting people who are less informed about this know what's going on, right? Yeah.
Yes, and I do believe that even though you may not be a game developer yourself, that you should know about this thing, because it is going to be affecting the future of not only games you love right now, but also games that you might love that could come out in the future. So something to think about. Anyway, all that being said, until next time. Bye-bye.
See ya.
See ya.
That's going to be it for this episode of Checkpoint Coffee. Thanks for listening, folks. Give us a like and subscribe if you're listening to us on YouTube. We'll meet you again next month for more gaming and pop culture reviews and discussions.